Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, I'm going to give my top 15 current wide receivers in the CFL. Really excited to bring you that list today. But really quickly, before we get started, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting the like button and subscribing to Hussey's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. I greatly appreciate all the support, guys. And with that said, let's get into the list. So to be eligible for this list, you had to have played in the CFL this season or been under contract with a CFL team this season. Those are the only players I considered for this list. And when I'm considering the value of these players going forward, it's all about what they're going to do in 2022. If I had the pick of the lot of all these receivers to build my team from scratch in a vacuum in 2022, and I just want to win in 2022, this is the order that I will pick these players. So starting at number 1 and then working our way down, and so it's not really going to be a countdown here, but we're going to start right at the top. And number 1, I have Reggie Bagelton of the Calgary Stampeders, currently scheduled to be a free agent, like a lot of these players on this list this offseason. And I think Reggie Bagelton just does it all. He has a lot of talent after the catch. That's one of the best aspects of his game, but he can make contested catches. Again, very good after the catch, very explosive player, runs a multitude of routes, and really kick-started this Calgary Stampeders offense late in the season in just a few games. Really productive in the playoff game as well, and I think going into free agency, he's going to be a very sought-after player this offseason, and I think the Stampeders will try like hell to retain him because I think he is the most talented receiver in the CFL today, and he's extremely well-rounded. At number 2, I have Brian Burnham of the BC Lions, and as I've said many times on this channel, I'm a big fan of Brian Burnham. Just so consistent week to week. He does everything you can ask of a number 1 receiver. Just runs a wide variety of routes, has a good amount of deep speed, great contested catch ability, good hands, can even, you can run a bubble screen with him. A lot of different options when you have Brian Burnham in your offense if you're the BC Lions. And he's just so consistent. Like I said, just year after year, he just quietly puts up big numbers. And he did again this season for a pretty bad BC Lions team. And that's why he ranks at number 2. Just really consistent receiver. And you really can't ask for more out of a number 1 receiver in a CFL offense. Now at number 3, we have one of the biggest breakout stars of the 2021 CFL season, in my opinion, and that is Montreal Alouettes receiver Eugene Lewis. And he's one of the few guys on this list that I believe is actually under contract already for the 2022 season. He's not going anywhere. He's sticking in Montreal with Vernon Adams as his quarterback. And Eugene Lewis, man, he is such an athletic freak. And, you know, in 2019, I was impressed by him, and I thought he had a load of potential, but I just saw too many mistakes, and I thought he was kind of like a one-trick pony, getting deep. I mean, just a really talented, deep threat receiver, but not a guy that runs a complex route tree and can be relied on as the number 1. But boy, did he change that this year. I mean, obviously, just still so many highlight reel deep plays down the field, and that's really Montreal's go-to on offense. But he really varied up the route tree this this season in the CFL, running a lot of crossing routes, dig routes, and really was the go-to guy in this Alouettes offense. And, I mean, just came down with some incredible catches that made the Alouettes quarterbacks look good throughout this season. So, Eugene Lewis, I think there's just still so much potential with him going forward, and I think this is just the start for him. He was a star at Oklahoma, and I'm really interested to see what he does next season for the Montreal Alouettes now that he's already re-signed with them. Now, speaking of breakout stars, at number 4, we have Lucky Whitehead of the BC Lions. 2 Lions landing in the top 4 here, and that probably explains the shirt here. But what can you say about Lucky Whitehead? He was the breakout guy of the CFL season, even more so than Lewis, because Lewis already had a 1,000-yard season under his belt. But Lucky Whitehead, you know, his second season in the CFL, showed a few flashes with Winnipeg, but they didn't really give him a true opportunity to be a full-time receiver. And then when he comes to BC, I didn't really expect him to, I thought he might do a little bit more in the receiving game than he did in Winnipeg, but I did not expect what happened in 2021, where he really became the do-it-all weapon for the BC Lions. So many explosive plays. I mean, I don't think he's the most well-rounded receiver on this list, but the things that he does so well, just namely the speed, he's got to be the fastest guy currently in the CFL. So, I mean, just that special trait that just strikes fear into defenses, I would take him over a lot of guys that are more well-rounded than him. Continuing the theme of breakout receivers this season, we have Kenny Lawler of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and Lawler has very similar traits, I think, to Eugene Lewis. Inconsistent guys in terms of hands and, kind of a one-trick pony in 2019 with the deep threat, but he became a much more well-rounded guy, and same with Eugene Lewis. He really became Winnipeg's go-to guy in this offense. Great chemistry with Zach Coloris, and he came down with just some big plays for this offense this season. I would still say he has a little bit more inconsistent hands than a guy like Eugene Lewis. And Eugene Lewis, I think he has those moments as well. But, I mean, I think slightly Kenny Lawler has a little bit more inconsistent hands than him. But Lawler is just a dominant deep threat player. And he really became that guy that Winnipeg didn't look like they had that number one star wide receiver going into the season. And Darvin Adams had some great seasons, but I don't think he was necessarily viewed as that star guy. But Kenny Lawler really became that this season, and that's why he ranks at number 5 on the list. Now at number 6, we have Duke Williams of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and I really had a difficult time placing this player because obviously it's a limited sample size since he's returned to the CFL. Of course, back in 2017, I believe it was, when he was with Edmonton, he was one of the best receivers in the league. I think led the league in receiving yards. But it's been quite a few years since then, and he was with my Buffalo Bills, my favorite NFL team in the NFL for the last few years. And, I mean, he saw some game action here or there. Actually, had a pretty good performance in the playoff game against Houston a few years ago. Duke Williams really took a couple games to get going, but once he did, he really turned it on in the playoffs against Calgary and Winnipeg for Saskatchewan. And I think that that's just the beginning for Duke. I think he's just really getting his feet warm again. He's at a young enough age that he has enough football left in him. And I'm really excited to see if he stays in Saskatchewan. I think it would be a smart choice because he is, I think, viewed as the number one guy there. He really was starting to become that down the stretch this season. So I'm really interested to see what he does next year. And that's why he ranks at number 6 on the list. Now at number 7, we have another guy that had a really big breakout season this year in the CFL. And that is Jake Weinike of the Montreal Alouettes, really completing that duo with Eugene Lewis. And the reason why he's not higher on the list, and I think a lot of people may say he should be higher because the season that he had, scored a bunch of touchdowns, made a lot of flashy plays. I just think that Eugene Lewis, personally, is the more talented player of the two. And I think that kind of, loosens the burden that is placed on Weinike when it comes to coverage. I think they slide a little bit more Eugene Lewis's way. I think we saw that a little bit this season, and Weinike gets a little bit more opportunities because of that. But Weinike is an extremely well-rounded receiver, just very worthy of being in this list at number 7 on this list, very high up, and really rose in my rankings. I thought he was a pretty good player in 2019, found the end zone a lot, and we saw that continue in 2021. But I think that he really became a more well-rounded receiver, really good in terms of attacking all areas of the field, short, intermediate game, but also can get deep. And again, winning contested catches is a big thing, I think, in the CFL, and I think he's very adept at doing that, good hands. I just don't think the high-end athleticism is enough for me to put him over other guys, but that's why I would have him at number 7. He's just a very well-rounded guy, and he may even get even better. He's only had a few seasons here in the CFL, so we'll see what happens with him going forward. Hopefully, he comes back with the Alouettes, but we'll see what happens. At number 8, I have Kamar Jordan of the Calgary Stampeders. Came off a big injury, really big comeback season for him. Still missed some games here and there, but when he was on the field, he was really a difference maker for this offense. And if they can bring back both Bagelton and Kamar Jordan next season, I think that's probably the best receiving duo in the CFL, arguably. Kamar Jordan just makes a lot of wow plays for you, has a lot of after-the-catch ability, he's just very physically talented. And, I think just the big thing with him is just staying healthy week to week. and hopefully he can continue to do that in 2022 and build on that great season that he had this year. I think it could have been even better again if he'd stayed healthy. But I think he is one of the best receivers in the CFL, really reestablished that this season. At number 9, I really struggled with this player because he's had such a consistent career, but I think he really took a back seat this season, and obviously the surrounding circumstances didn't really help, and that's Greg Ellingson of the Edmonton Elks. I'm not too sure what Greg Ellingson's going to do this offseason. He's had a long career. I don't know if he's going to want to stay around in Edmonton after what happened. But I think, maybe Chris Jones convinces him to come back and a lot of these veterans to come back. But Ellingson's just an incredibly consistent receiver and had a pretty good season this year, but it just wasn't up to his standards. Obviously didn't hit 1,000 yards and continue that, I think it was 5-year streak of hitting 1,000 yards at least. And in the 14-game season, obviously, pretty hard to do, and not many guys did it this year. I think only one guy actually did it this year. But still, still a little bit below what you would have expected from Greg Ellingson this year. I think he had 1 touchdown the entire season. So, I mean, Ellingson, I think just because he's been so consistent, I had to have him pretty high on this list. I just think other guys have kind of overtaken him because they have more of an athletic ceiling, even though Ellingson is just still a very productive player and very well-rounded, one of the best route runners in the CFL right now. And so I'm really interested to see if he can really raise his play again in 2022 and really get himself back into that top 5 conversation like I would have had him before the 2021 season. Rounding out the top 10, and this one may surprise people, and people probably have forgotten about him a little bit, and that is Braylon Addison of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Missed almost the whole season this year, only played 3 games, really only 2 games in a quarter. But in that last game that he did play in the first quarter, he had almost 100 yards. I think he had 99 yards through 1 quarter play. And, he could have went off for 200 that day. Addison is a very productive receiver in his, short sample size here in the CFL. 2019, he was an all-star. I just think he's incredibly well-rounded. And you could do a lot of things with him. They like to use him in the backfield, hand the ball off to him a little bit. And I think that Brandon Banks was really affected by the fact that he was out of the lineup basically the whole season this year. I mean, because I think Addison really took a lot of pressure off him in 2019. Addison just, again, really productive when he was in the lineup for those 3 games this season. And I think if he can have a healthy year next year, it just all depends on that. I mean, just going forward, I hope, because he's still a younger guy, keep healthy for the 2022 season, because I think he's one of the most talented receivers in the league in terms of having that well-rounded skill set, can just do a whole bunch of things for you, and I think he's definitely the most well-rounded receiver that the Tiger Cats have. So, I mean, count how many times I said well-rounded there, but he just really is a very well-rounded and versatile weapon in this offense for the Tiger Cats, and they really missed him this season. Now, moving into the last 5 here, and I'm going to kind of pick up the pace here. At number 11, I have Eric Rogers of the Toronto Argonauts. Really struggled with injuries this year, but when he was in there, I mean, still just a dynamic player for this offense. Really good red zone target. That's really his biggest strength. A great contested catch ability, just that great perimeter receiver. You can put him in the slot, you can put him out wide. He's just a very talented player. But it's just about staying healthy, and sometimes he has the occasional doubt of the drops there. So Eric Rogers is still a very talented receiver. I think he's the best receiver of that cluster of very, very good Toronto receivers there, and that's why he ranks at number 11. At number 12, I have Jalen Acklin of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Just a very underrated season this year. Was their best receiver start to finish this year. Just does a whole bunch of things well. Not incredibly flashy, but, he'll make catches in all areas of the field. Occasional deep ball as well. So I think he's an incredibly valuable piece of this Hamilton Tiger Cats offense. At number 13, I think he's kind of, a little bit very inconsistent player, and that's Tavares Daniels of the Toronto Argonauts. I think his high-end ability is better than a guy like Acklin, but I think that consistency week to week this year, there was just weeks that Daniels just didn't, produce anything really this year. And, on the other hand, you have games where against the Tiger Cats, he absolutely killed them with that incredible catch, one of the highlights of the year in the end zone. And he's really capable of those highlight reel plays, but you just don't see the week-to-week consistency like you do with some of these guys that are higher on this list, in my opinion. And then at number 14, we have Brandon Banks of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And if you did this before the season, and in 2019, he would be number 1 or number 2 on this list, depending on who you asked. But Brandon Banks has really had a huge fall from grace. I think a lot of it has to do with age. That layoff must have hurt a lot of these older players, and a lot of older players dominated the CFL in 2019. And Banks was really the poster child of that. Him and Charleston Hughes really fell off a cliff. But I will say this about Brandon Banks. Going into next year, he started to play his best football near the end of the season. So it really looks like he could, have a good resurgence next year. But I think a lot of it is about staying healthy. He took a bunch of big hits this year, honestly, way more than I can remember in the 2019 season. And I think that, maybe those explosive plays start to come back. But like I said, I think he actually did play pretty well in the playoffs. I'm really interested to see what he does next year. And ranking number 14 shows you how poor of a season that he had this year and how much, I think going into next year, how much a year older, how it's going to affect him. But I still have to include him on this list because he does have, those moments still, and started to play well better down the stretch. So I'm really interested to see what he does next year. And finally, at number 15, I have Nick Dempsky of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. This may surprise some people, but when I was looking around at these other guys that are, I'll mention in a sec, the guys that just missed the cut, I think Dempsky does a lot of, specific things that he brings to the table. And, that sometimes can mean a lot more than being, that more productive receiver. Dempsky really came into his own this year, became a more better, well-rounded receiver, but he still kept those things that made him so special. You can use him in the run game. I mean, one of the best rushing slot backs we have in the CFL today, if you can call it that. You see a lot of teams using that, but he is the best at doing that. Just kind of almost a natural kind of running back. Must have had that growing up as well. But Dempsky, he took those things, what he was already doing previously well, and really improved on that, and he also became that more well-rounded receiver. Zach Coloris loves him, and he is making plays all over the field. Just pretty good route runner. I mean, not going to be the most targeted guy in the offense. I don't think he's really a number 1 receiver per se, but when you stack it up, I think he's just does a lot of things well, and I don't think the Winnipeg offense would be as good without him. I think he is more valuable to this offense than, say, a Darvin Adams was this year for sure. And I'm really interested to see what his role is with this team going forward. He is one of their core guys, I think. And I'm really interested to see how he follows it up. If this was a full season this year, he would have hit 1,000 yards. So I'm really interested to see what he does in 2022. And now I briefly just want to talk about the guys that just missed the cut in my mind. And I really strongly considered it. The CFL wide receiver pool is so deep right now, and just so many of these guys are so close. And that's really why I wanted to talk about this today, because it's just a really interesting position, and I just love receivers. So the guys I really considered that didn't make the cut, Shaq Evans of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. If you had asked me before the season, I would have had him in the top 3. Honestly, he had an incredible 2019 season, was a dynamic part of that Saskatchewan Roughriders offense, struggled this year with injuries. When he was on the field in the playoffs, he just really was phased out of the offense despite getting targets late in the regular season when he came back from injury. Kyron Moore, his teammate, very productive player, but I mean, when he was asked to be that number 1 guy, he just really isn't that. He's just a really, really good number 2 or 3 receiver in a CFL offense, in my opinion. A really good short intermediate receiver, but just not going to do a whole lot in terms of consistently creating big plays. And you'll see that when you have a receiver that is high volume but has less than 10 yards per catch, that's usually a good sign that it's just not producing explosive plays on a regular basis. And then Darrell Walker is a guy that easily would have made this list last year, but in 2019, I mean, but really just fell off a cliff this year. Looked disinterested throughout a lot of the season with Edmonton. Really interested to see if he's back in the CFL next year. I don't know. We'll see what happens if he's back in Edmonton. But again, just really interested to see what happens with him. Curly Gittins Jr., Toronto. Toronto has a lot of really, really good receivers. Him and Ricky Collins, who I'm going to mention next. They're just all, pretty similar in terms of production this year. They really did a good job spreading the ball around. Not really that core number one guy. I mean, I think Rogers is, but Gittins and Collins had really good season this year. And Collins couldn't buy a touchdown the whole year, but had a lot of great plays after the catch. So Toronto, really interesting receiving core. Those guys were considered. And then finally, Tim White for Hamilton. A rookie, I just don't know how well-rounded he is yet. Had a lot of great plays as a deep threat and in the, reverse game and, handing the ball off to him on occasion. But we'll see what happens with him and his development. I think I just need to see one more year of him. But those are the guys I considered for this list that didn't make the cut. But with that said, that is going to be the end of today's video, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting the like button and subscribing to Aussie's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. I greatly appreciate it, guys. And with that said, let me know in the comment section, where did I go wrong? What players would you have where I didn't have them? And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Peace.